The initial skirmishes were dismissed as anomalies, isolated incidents on the fringes of Cathan's space, outposts falling silent, supply convoys vanishing without a trace, patrol ships found adrift with their crews missing, leaving behind only faint, unsettling whispers on the comms. The Cathan High Command, complacent in their centuries of unchallenged dominance, attributed these losses to rogue elements, navigational errors, or perhaps even previously unknown, localized predators. They were wrong, terribly wrong. The escalation was gradual, insidious. A pattern began to emerge, a chillingly efficient methodology that defied conventional military doctrine. Cathan forces would mobilize to quell an uprising on a newly conquered world, only to find the rebellion vanished, the infrastructure subtly sabotaged in ways that suggested an intimate knowledge of their systems. Entire garrisons would be deployed to secure a strategic nexus, only to awaken to find their weapons systems disabled, their command structure subtly compromised, and cryptic symbols etched into their consoles. Symbols that no Cathan linguist could decipher, yet which instilled a primal dread. It was the Psi Corps who first coined the moniker, the Ghost Legion of Terra. Their empaths reported a psychic residue at the sites of these disappearances. Not the raw, chaotic energy of battle, but a fleeting sense of presence, a whisper of thought, a chillingly detached awareness that vanished as quickly as it appeared. It was as if their enemy was everywhere and nowhere, observing, learning, acting with an almost preternatural understanding of their foe. The historical archives, initially dismissed as irrelevant, became objects of intense study. The rise of humanity from a single, resource-depleted planet was a brutal testament to their adaptability. Their history was a tapestry woven with threads of constant conflict, internal strife, giving way to a fierce, almost desperate unity when faced with an external threat. They had warred with themselves for millennia, honing their strategies, their technologies, their very psychology into a weapon. The Cathan, a species that had achieved interstellar dominance through overwhelming force and rigid hierarchical structures, struggled to comprehend this fluidity, this almost chaotic adaptability. Their battle plans were intricate, their formations precise, their strategies based on predictable responses. The humans, however, were unpredictable. They embraced asymmetry. They exploited the terrain, turning seemingly insignificant features into deadly choke points. They used deception as a primary tactic, feints and diversions executed with a theatrical flair that bordered on psychological warfare. Captured human soldiers, a rare occurrence, offered little insight. They were disciplined, their minds shielded, their loyalty absolute. When interrogated, they spoke of unconventional warfare, of asymmetric engagement, of winning without fighting. These concepts were alien to the Cathan military lexicon. The stories of their tactics became legendary, whispered in fear and grudging admiration across the Cathan ranks. A vital communication hub, heavily fortified and deemed impenetrable, fell silent overnight. When Cathan's shock troops finally breached its defenses, they found no signs of battle, no casualties, only intricate networks of deactivated systems and the same unsettling symbols etched into the main control panel. Later analysis revealed that the human infiltrators had moved through the ventilation shafts, utilizing sonic dampeners and thermal cloaking technology so advanced it bordered on the mythical. On the volcanic moon of Cygnus VII, a Cathan armored division was ambushed in a narrow canyon. Initial reports suggested heavy resistance, but when reinforcements arrived, they found only the mangled remains of Cathan vehicles and the eerie silence of a ghost town. Subsequent investigation revealed a network of strategically placed seismic charges, detonated with pinpoint accuracy, triggering a rock slide that annihilated the entire division. There was no direct engagement, no opportunity for the Cathan to even fire a shot. The psychological impact of these ghost attacks was devastating. Cathan soldiers, accustomed to the brutal logic of direct confrontation, began to see threats in every shadow, to hear phantom footsteps in the silence. Paranoia spread like a contagion, eroding morale and discipline. The once unwavering confidence of the Cathan military began to crumble. The High Command, desperate for answers, turned to their most brilliant strategists, their most skilled scions. They pored over battle logs, sensor data, captured human artifacts, searching for a pattern, a weakness, an exploitable flaw. But the humans remained an enigma, their tactics as fluid and unpredictable as the shifting sands of a desert storm. One Cathan battle commander, a veteran of 100 campaigns, finally broke the silence during a war council. His voice was heavy with a dawning realization. They are not fighting a war of conquest. They are fighting a war of perception. They are making us doubt ourselves, doubt our strength, doubt our very reality. The young Xylar journalist, Lyra 7, now embedded with a frontline Cathan unit on the besieged world of Viridia Prime, witnessed this firsthand. The constant tension, the jumpiness of the soldiers, the haunted look in their multifaceted eyes. They were fighting an enemy they could not see, could not understand, could not predict. The Cathan, for all their technological superiority, were being outmaneuvered by an enemy that seemed to operate by an entirely different set of rules. One evening, huddled in a dimly lit command tent, Lyra 7 listened as a grizzled Cathan sergeant recounted a recent skirmish. We saw them, just for a moment, figures moving in the periphery, too fast to track. Then nothing, but our sentry drones were disabled, our perimeter breached. It was as if they simply willed it to happen. Lyra 7 accessed her datapad, reviewing fragmented reports, chilling testimonies, and the ever-present, undeciphered symbols. She began to see a pattern, not in their tactics, but in their targets. The humans weren't just attacking military installations, they were targeting infrastructure, communication networks, even cultural centers, anything that held the Ktharn presence together. It was a war of attrition, not of resources, but of morale, of certainty. Then came the whispers of Project Erebus, a rumored initiative within the Terran Shadow Command structure, so classified that even captured officers would go silent at its mention. Erebus, in ancient human mythology, was a primordial deity of darkness and shadow, a fitting name perhaps for what the Cathan now faced. According to intercepted transmissions, Erebus was not a single unit, but a doctrine, a culmination of centuries of psychological warfare, cyber-infiltration, guerrilla tactics, and socio-cultural subversion. It operated on the principle that true victory lay not in destruction, but in erosion, the slow, deliberate unraveling of an opponent's will to fight. By the time the Cathan fully grasped this, the rot had spread too far. Local governors reported rising insubordination among their auxiliaries. Vassal species, once cowed into submission, began to question their allegiance. Some defected entirely, seduced by the promise of Terran autonomy. Others simply vanished, leaving only encrypted messages and the now familiar glyphs carved into walls and data cores alike. Entire Cathan flotillas were found adrift in the void, their crews incapacitated by neuroviruses introduced through seemingly innocuous entertainment broadcasts. Civilian populations, once compliant, were racked by waves of paranoia, incited by subtle mimetic agents woven into popular media. The Terrans weren't merely winning battles, they were rewriting reality. Desperate to stem the tide, Cathan authorized the use of their most brutal countermeasures: planet-side protocols, scorched star campaigns, psychic purges. But these only hastened their decline. Each atrocity became fuel for Terran propaganda, each act of repression a recruitment tool for the growing resistance. The more force the Cathan applied, the more the humans slipped through their fingers, like smoke, like ghosts. And through it all, the symbols continued to appear. They were found etched into the hulls of derelict ships, burned into neural implants, even woven into the dreams of sensitive scions. Linguists, mathematicians, even theologians were brought in to decipher them. Some said they were coordinates. Others believed them to be ideological manifestos encoded in multidimensional syntax. A few whispered that they were instructions, not for humans, but for the Cathan themselves. Lyra 7, driven by a compulsion she could no longer explain, compiled her findings into a single transmission. It was part report, part plea, part prophecy. The Terrans are not merely fighting for survival, she wrote. They are becoming something else, a new force of nature, born not of biology, but of ideology. You cannot kill what has become an idea, and this idea, it wears a human face. She sent the transmission into the network and watched the stars outside her window, wondering how many others were watching her back. Far away, in a hidden chamber aboard a cloaked Terran vessel, an operative read Lyra 7's transmission. They smiled. The operative, known only as Wraith, set the datapad down, the glow of Lyra 7's transmission fading into the ambient darkness of the command chamber. Around them, other members of the Ghost Legion watched in silence, their faces unreadable behind adaptive visors. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Wraith nodded once, slowly. "She sees," they said. That simple phrase carried weight. It meant Lyra 7 had glimpsed the deeper pattern. Not just the tactics, not just the symbols, but the purpose. And more importantly, it meant the time had come. The command chamber shimmered as secure channels lit up across 1,000 nodes of the Legion's decentralized network. From the scorched ruins of Cernak Outpost to the hidden orbital platforms circling the gas giant Phoros, encrypted instructions flowed like blood through a capillary web. They were not orders. The Ghost Legion did not operate on orders. They were alignments, markers, signals, a shift in the pattern. Phase Omega had begun. On the jungle world of Thalos Phi, a dormant cell awoke. Using mimicry implants, they assumed the identities of local Cathan administrators and issued a falsified directive redirecting orbital logistics. Within hours, supply lines critical to 3 outer sector fleets were rerouted into deep space to rendezvous points that did not exist. On Drek Var Station, a Cathan cultural archive suddenly overloaded and caught fire. The emergency teams arrived too late to save the contents, 1,000 years of Imperial history lost in minutes. But what they didn't know was that the fire was a distraction. Hidden beneath the ash, embedded deep in the foundation stones, were a series of Terran memory ciphers, waiting, perhaps, for a future civilization to find and decode the truth. In the icy rings of Soltesh 9, a listening array that had long gone dark flickered to life for 13 seconds. It broadcast one signal, on a frequency unused for centuries, a human lullaby distorted by subharmonic overlays. The melody reached far into the void, echoing through gravitational eddies, picked up by hundreds of receivers. For those who understood, it was a call, a reunion. Lyra 7 felt it in her bones before her sensors registered the anomaly, a subtle shift in the galactic data stream. Disinformation campaigns collapsed under their own weight. Rebel communications once thought lost began to synchronize. Even ancient Terran relics, inert for decades, reactivated and pulsed with energy. Something vast was moving beneath the surface. Not a fleet, not a weapon, an awakening. She stood at the edge of an excavation site on the barren moon of Kel Orus, gazing down at a monolith newly unearthed by the Resistance. Covered in the same symbols that had haunted her for years, the black structure radiated a low, resonant hum that wasn't quite sound, more like a memory echoing in the fabric of the mind. As she reached out to touch it, the symbols shifted, rearranged themselves, responded. And in that moment, Lyra 7 understood. The Ghost Legion had never been merely a military unit. It was a catalyst, the vanguard of a philosophical insurgency, seeded by a species that had transcended simple warfare. The Terrans were rewriting the galactic narrative, reprogramming civilization itself. They weren't just dismantling empires, they were building something new, and it had already begun. The surface of the monolith was cold, impossibly so, despite the thermal shielding of her suit. Yet when Lyra 7's fingers brushed the etched ideograms, she felt not chill, but contact. A whisper of thought unfurled in her mind, not in words, but in impressions. Fire in the sky, chains breaking, the rhythm of footsteps echoing across countless worlds. She stumbled back, heart pounding. Behind her, the Resistance archaeologist stared in stunned silence as the monolith's symbols began to glow, softly at first, then with rising intensity. Patterns spiraled outward across the ground, forming intricate glyphs that pulsed with synchronized precision. One of the researchers stepped forward. "It's responding to her." "No," Lyra 7 whispered, "it's responding to all of us." At that moment, across the galaxy, other monoliths began to awaken. Buried in catacombs beneath old Cathan temples, hidden in the wreckage of forgotten battles, embedded in derelict stations that had drifted dark for centuries. Each one lit with the same ethereal glow, broadcasting signals not to ships or machines, but to minds, to consciousness. The Ghost Legion had not merely fought to collapse an empire, they had been preparing the galaxy for something else. On a distant Terran archive ship drifting near a binary dwarf star, Wraith stood before a flickering display showing activation points across known space. Each pulsing dot represented a location where the Terran memory ciphers were being accessed, absorbed, understood. Centuries of encoded culture, strategy, philosophy, and warning, now waking in the minds of the oppressed, the forgotten, the rebellious. Wraith turned to the gathered operatives. Phase Omega is not the end. It is the seed. They transmitted a final message into the network, a pattern of tone, light, and symbol. It was not a command. It was an invitation. Back on Kelorus, Lyra 7 heard it, a harmonic resonance deep in the monolith, matching the signal now flooding the stars, and in that resonance she felt them, the Terrans, not as conquerors, not even as liberators, as teachers. She dropped to her knees, overcome not by fear or reverence, but by the sheer scale of it. The Ghost Legion had never truly vanished. They had become the foundation of something larger, a decentralized inheritance of resistance, adaptability, and insight. A legacy meant to guide others through darkness without ever showing them the path directly, because the path was within them. And as the monolith's light pulsed faster, Lyra 7's datapad chimed with a new transmission, not from any known source. It contained no coordinates, no strategy, no language she recognized. Only a title. Project Echelon, The Next Ghosts. Years after the fall of the Cathan Empire, the true origins of the Ghost Legion began to surface from the shadows of classified archives and whispered testimony. Deep within the Terran Coalition's clandestine research facilities, Project Echelon was born, a secret initiative designed to evolve the Ghost Legion's legacy into something even more elusive, more potent. The survivors of the original Ghost Legion had become legends, but war had taken its toll. Recognizing the need for a new generation of operatives, the Coalition's finest scientists, psionic experts, and tacticians collaborated to create an elite force, the Wraith. These were operatives enhanced beyond human limits, integrated with cutting-edge cybernetic implants, and trained in the arts of stealth, infiltration, and psychological warfare to a degree previously thought impossible. Unlike their predecessors, the Wraith were not just soldiers, but living weapons, silent, deadly, and intangible as phantoms. Their minds were linked by a neural network known as the Black Signal, a covert communication web that allowed instantaneous coordination and shared awareness, turning disparate cells into a seamless, unified entity despite vast distances. The Black Signal was more than just a technology. It was an extension of the human will, forged in the crucible of survival and conflict. It imbued the Wraith with an almost supernatural ability to anticipate enemy movements, adapt to evolving threats, and strike with precision before their foes even realized they were under attack. This next iteration of the Ghost Legion operated with ruthless efficiency and unmatched secrecy. Their targets extended beyond the military and political infrastructure of oppressive regimes. They struck at the very heart of authoritarian control, disrupting propaganda, fracturing social cohesion, and igniting sparks of rebellion wherever tyranny took hold. The legacy of the Ghost Legion and the rise of the Wraith were inseparable. They were two sides of the same coin. The Ghost Legion, the shadowy originators who shattered an empire through cunning and resilience, and the Wraith, their evolved successors, the silent blade in the dark, embodying humanity's relentless spirit of adaptation and defiance. The resurgence of the Wraith sent shockwaves through the remnants of the Cathan loyalists and other oppressive factions scattered across the galaxy. Unlike the original Ghost Legion, whose tactics were often indirect and elusive, the Wraith operated with surgical precision, silencing traitors, dismantling weapons caches, and severing communication lines before entire star systems could muster a response. Despite their advanced technology and psionic enhancements, the Wraith never lost sight of the human core at their center, the same indomitable will that had sparked the Ghost Legion's rebellion centuries before. Legends among the Wraith told of their founders walking through the ashes of fallen empires, their ghosts whispering guidance and strength to each new generation. But the Black Signal was not without its risks. Rumors circulated of operatives losing themselves to the constant neural link, fragments of identity dissolving into the collective consciousness, becoming echoes rather than individuals. Some feared that the Wraith might one day become too entwined, too dependent on the signal, risking their humanity for power. Still, the Coalition pressed on, driven by necessity, and haunted by the memories of how close they came to extinction. The Wraith were humanity's shield and sword, a promise that even in the darkest shadows of tyranny, ghosts would rise. The moon hung low over the industrial sprawl of Nerid 4, its dim light barely piercing the perpetual smog. In the shadowed alleyways of the mining colony's central hub, the Wraith operatives moved like whispers, unseen, unheard, deadly. "Echo team, status," whispered Vex through the neural link, his voice a cold thread threading through the shared consciousness. "Clear," came the quick responses from the other three, Dust, Mirror, and a new recruit known only as Shade. Their target, a Cathan data node rumoured to contain encrypted coordinates for upcoming fleet deployments. Destroy it, and the Coalition would gain precious hours to evacuate key personnel from a besieged outpost. Vex scanned the perimeter, sensing the faint psychic hum of Cathan patrols nearby. Using the black signal, he sent subtle pulses, momentarily scrambling enemy sensors and weaving illusions of phantom movements. "On my mark," he breathed. Dust slipped forward, her movements a choreography of silent precision. At the terminal, she injected micro-sabotage nanobots, tiny assassins designed to corrupt the node's core without triggering alarms. Mirror deployed holographic decoys, scattering a small patrol into confusion and leaving a path clear. Suddenly, a Cathan sentry rounded the corner. Shade froze, heart pounding. But then, with a thought, the neural link flooded her mind with calm, the collected focus of the Legion. The sentry's eyes glazed as psychic tendrils wrapped around his consciousness, lulling him into a trance before he collapsed silently to the ground. "Node compromised," Dust signaled. "Extraction point in 5, Vex replied, already mapping their exit through labyrinthine tunnels beneath the colony. As they vanished into the shadows, the Wraith left behind no trace but a single symbol etched in faint bioluminescent ink on the data node's casing, an ancient Terran ideogram for resilience. The symbol glowed softly, its light barely perceptible to any but the most observant. It was a silent message, a signature of the Ghost Legion's presence and their unyielding spirit. For the Cathan, it was a mark of defiance, for those who understood, a beacon of hope. Far above, in the orbital command station, alerts blared incessantly. High command officers scrambled to make sense of the latest breach. "Another data node compromised," a young analyst reported, voice trembling. And again, no signs of enemy forces. It's like they never existed. General Thalkor slammed his fist against the console. "This is no ordinary enemy. They move like shadows, strike like ghosts. Our weapons cannot touch them. Our sensors cannot find them." His mandibles twitched with frustration. "We must adapt, deploy counter-psionic units, increase patrols, tighten security on all critical infrastructure." But deep in his core, a chilling doubt gnawed at him. This enemy was not just fighting a war of bullets and bombs, it was a war of minds, perception, and endurance. Back on the surface, the Wraith regrouped in a hidden chamber far from prying eyes. Vex removed her helmet, revealing sharp eyes that burned with determination. "We got what we came for," she said quietly, fingers already scanning the decrypted data files on her portable console. Dust leaned closer. "This intel could cripple their supply lines for months. We've hit them where it hurts." Mirror nodded, shadows flickering across their features. "And the symbol, it's spreading. Other cells are marking their victories with it." Vex's gaze hardened. "Good. Resilience is our message. We fight not just for today, but for tomorrow." A faint pulse emanated from the ideogram still etched in her console, a reminder that the fight was far from over. The message of resilience rippled through the underground network of the Ghost Legion. Every cell knew that their strength lay not in overwhelming force, but in the patient, relentless dismantling of the Cathan Empire's foundations. The Wraith were just one thread in a vast web of operatives scattered across dozens of star systems, each striking with precision and vanishing before the enemy could respond. Vex's datapad buzzed with a new alert, an urgent transmission from the Terran command nexus hidden deep within the asteroid belt of the Viridian system. "New target," she murmured. "A Cathan communications hub on the moon Helios. If we take it down, their fleet coordination will be crippled for weeks." Dust tightened their grip on the toolkit. "Perfect. It's also close to several resource depots we've been monitoring. Disrupting those supply chains will amplify the effect." Mirror smirked. their voice low and confident. "And I've already planted a few surprises in their training simulations on Viridia Prime. The officers won't know what hit them." The team moved swiftly, coordinating their approach with silent efficiency. The mission was clear: infiltrate, sabotage, and vanish without a trace. Meanwhile, in the shadowed halls of the Cathan High Command, General Thalcor convened an emergency war council. The room hummed with tension as the latest intelligence reports flooded in. "We must adapt or perish," Thalcor declared. "Our old tactics are useless against an enemy who strikes in whispers and shadows. I'm authorizing the deployment of psi-shadow units, our best operatives trained in counter-infiltration and psychic defense." An advisor hesitated. "General, these units require time to prepare, and the Ghost Legion moves faster than we can react." Thalcor's mandibles clicked sharply. "Then we buy time by any means necessary. Increased surveillance, psychological operations, and ruthless countermeasures. We must fracture their network from within." Back on Helios, the Wraith infiltrated the moon's labyrinthine tunnels beneath the communications hub. Silent and unseen, they bypassed security nodes and planted micro-disruptors in critical systems. As Vex placed the final device, the faint bioluminescent glow of another Terran symbol appeared on the mainframe, a complex ideogram for adaptability. "This is more than sabotage," Vex whispered. "It's a message to the Cathan. We evolve, we survive, we overcome." The disruptors hummed to life, sending waves of interference through the hub's comm arrays. Across multiple star systems, Cathan vessels found their orders garbled, their fleet maneuvers thrown into chaos. The Ghost Legion's shadow spread wider, their legend growing with every silent victory. Wraith exfiltrated through the lower ice caverns beneath the Helios hub, where temperature sensors were too unstable for accurate scans. As they ascended toward the extraction point, the tunnel walls shimmered with ice formations, twisting into unnatural shapes, as if the moon itself whispered ancient truths to those who dared listen. At the surface, their cloaked dropship descended silently through the pale blue atmosphere, its engines whispering against the snow-laden rock. As the hatch opened, Mira paused, glancing back at the base now dimming into darkness. "We're not just taking them apart," they said quietly. "We're changing the way wars are fought." Dust stepped aboard last, the cold wind flicking the edges of their hood. "We're ghosts in their machine now. They'll never catch up." Once airborne, Vex connected to the Ghost Legion's central nexus, a decentralized lattice of AI-run relays, human sympathizers, and embedded agents scattered through the stars. From orbit, they watched as the comm hub's final failsafes collapsed, sending a shockwave of blind silence through the Cathan war web. But the silence didn't last. Days later, planet Ixor Prime, Cathan Inner Territory. In the depths of a Cathan spire temple, a cloaked figure stepped forward into candlelight. Not fully Cathan, not quite Terran either. A hybrid, modified, forgotten. "Project Echo has been reactivated," the figure said, placing a data crystal on the altar. "You were right, the Wraith weren't born in the dark. They were made there." The High Seer clicked softly. "By us." The hybrid nodded. "By your predecessors, by accident or by fear. The Ghost Legion's origin traces to a failed psi program meant to embed Terran operatives into Cathan minds. It was meant to end the war before it started. Instead, it created monsters and survivors." The seer turned to the shadows. "Then perhaps the only way to end them is to understand them." A dozen mindshapers emerged from the walls, their tendrils glowing with psionic fire. "We go into the storm now." Meanwhile, aboard the Ghost Legion flagship Nyx, Vex stared at the decrypted files from Helios, just received from the extraction. What she found wasn't just a fleet manifest or communications algorithm. It was memory, recordings, experiments, audio logs, visual dreams, clips of early Wraith operatives undergoing psychic fragmentation, dreams being pulled apart and weaponized, her own name, before she was Vex, before the wipes, before the rebirth. Mira stood beside her, watching the glyphs scroll. "You knew?" "I suspected," she said. "We weren't chosen for this. We were broken, and they built something out of the ruins." Dust entered, a look of unease tightening their features. "Command just signaled. We have a tail, unmarked cruiser, Cathan stealth class, tracking us since Helios." "Then it begins," Mira whispered. Vex closed the file. "They're coming for their ghosts."